YouTube, welcome back to UniXTCG. Today we're gonna drop I want to say 1 or 2 videos, but this first one's gonna be with One Piece. I think the next one's gonna be with Battle Spirits. Yeah. So we are going to talk about the OP04 meta and global. A lot of people feel like it's a copy and paste to a high degree from the JP format. However, just our hits to red are going to do a little ripples that are actually going to change how the format works in general. And so yeah, we're gonna dive into that. I do want to say real quick that we are this close to 5,000 subscribers. We are 100 subscribers away, and so every little bit counts, as it always did. So if you're feeling the vibe, like the video, comment, let me know your thoughts, and then maybe even join the UniX fam today by hitting the subscribe button. We also got a whole bunch of other things in the link tree. So yeah, just stop on by and just check out all the quadrants of Universe X. Past that, I do want to say I will be at New York Comic-Con in 1 week's time as a content creator. I'll be there with decks from multiple games, One Piece, Battle Spirits, maybe even some Dragon Ball. And if you guys would like to hop over there, check me out at the booth, catch some business cards just so you can have all this stuff. It's the first little bit of I don't know, paraphernalia that I think I've ever made. So that's gonna be a little cool. But I'd love to talk, see you guys, maybe even play some games before or after the points where I'm at the booth. Either way, it's gonna be a blast. So with that being said, let us hop into the meat and potatoes and let's talk about the format from the top to the bottom. We're gonna try to make this a 10-15 minute video because really we're just trying to touch on the points that you need to know when you enter these treasure cups or these regionals, or when you go to your locals. And then yeah, later in the week we shall have some more gameplay from OP04. So yeah, alrighty then. So when it comes to what we're doing, I think everybody can be in agreement that the de facto, what most people will think of when they think of the big three of this format, will be red in the form of Whitebeard. Zoro can be in there too, but I would say predominantly most people are looking at Whitebeard. Then you've got black in the form of Rebecca, and you've got yellow in the form of Katakuri. Now, each of these will have their respective strengths and weaknesses, and we're gonna dive into that, but we're also going to talk about the way certain fringe decks can really just kind of get up in there. Dofi, I will say, Dofi is a good deck. Definitely in the top tier, but I do think that if you were to make a big three, Dofi would not be over Katakuri, Rebecca, or Whitebeard, but Dofi can perform very well in the competitive landscape in general. So just talking about those big three, normally in Japan, we've seen that Rebecca and Whitebeard kind of vie for dominance. They both very much so saturate the top cuts with Katakuri kind of getting its way in there time and time again, but not in the same saturation as those the former two. Well, we're gonna start with Whitebeard, okay? When it comes to Whitebeard, there's not too much to re-go over. Everybody knows that Whitebeard has a bigger base body, so you have to work less to just defend it. It's seeing more cards than any other deck, and towards the end of the game, even when it has 0 life, it's sitting at an insurmountable hand in a lot of cases, and it's very hard to break through that. Now, the things that have hurt it though, we have 3 cards limited to 1, and those cards are the Marco blocker, which provided a very, very strong wall that could be brought back very easily in that deck saturated with Whitebeard cards, and then on top of that, you're going to be able to turn them into attackers the moment you deem it necessary. The moment you need to go for that all in, if you have 3 Marco blockers on board, you can swing for that. But we have it at 1 now, so that card is much more of a commodity. That changes a lot more than just, oh well, we have less blockers. Because now, if you're going on your top deck and you play an Ezo and you see something I don't know, a big body you want early game, but you see your 1 of Marco that you won't need until 3 turns from now minimum, then you have to take the Marco because there's no guarantee. Actually, it's not even no guarantee. You're not seeing that card again. So having a card at 1 does more than just making it harder to see. It also prioritizes your top 5s a lot more in different ways that you didn't necessarily anticipate before. Same thing goes for Radical Beam. Radical Beam is now at 1, been at 1 for a little bit, and that's going to do the same thing. You're going to be at points where you have to play, well, you don't run Beggies in this deck, but you see that card, and before it was a staple that you were always able to just count on seeing multiple times per game with the amount of cards you saw on Whitebeard. That's not the case anymore. And then last but not least, you have the Whitebeard guy himself. this is the big shebang. Dude is the boss card of the deck, and now he is at 1. So once again, when you see him with Ezo, you might have to prioritize him because you will not see him again if you put him at the bottom of the deck. Now, the thing about Whitebeard in the global meta is simply that Whitebeard no longer has the defenses that it used to have. While the Whitebeard card is in itself a little bit of a defense, Sensu Bean ×2 if you play Dragon Ball. You've also got Radical Beam and Marco. So now Whitebeard has to be more aggressive. Whitebeard has no choice but to just understand that it can't rely on the board defenses, not the Radical Beam defenses. It needs to actually have just gas in hand. Now you can offset this by playing the 2-drop blocker because that's a little harder to be destroyed by lots of the effects from Rebecca and things like that. But yeah, Whitebeard still has the gas, it still has the pressure to win, and it still is. Now moving forward, because we've exhausted Whitebeard heavily throughout last format, you now have Rebecca. Rebecca is new to the scene, but the main thing about Rebecca is that it's built in a funny way. I've made a bunch of videos about Rebecca showcasing it. Rebecca is essentially a deck that's able to make unavoidable damage. Like literally, when you don't have a blocker, it is very hard to stop a 16k or higher Gear 4th Luffy from coming at your face, and sometimes it can be even double strike. So what this makes is a environment where there are times where you can have 4 life, and if you just get caught lacking, like your blocker gets destroyed, they have an Olympus on the board, they minus cost from your blocker, and they blow it up with like one of their many ways to blow up a 1-drop, and then you get King Kong gun and just get double struck, put 7 back, double struck again. You can lose 4 life in a simple turn, and there's no way you could have out countered that 16k or more damage. You start off at base 7k, he goes up to 3k, it goes up 6k with King Gungan. That's 13. You could just put a couple more on that and just go in on that one. So it gets very, very, very scary. And if you're at 2 life and that same situation happens, you're literally just dead. So Rebecca has the highest knockout power of the game. Now the other part about that is Rebecca plays quite a few blockers. You have the 4 Bartolomeos, you have the 4 Iori, I think, and then you have, sorry, it's the name, I know, it's the 2-drop blocker, and then you have 4 Sabos. And what you're looking at with that is a position where you have 12 blockers in the deck, and 4 of those blockers have a decent body with the ability to make the rest of your cards not destroyable by effect. And playing this the correct way, you are sometimes able to have, like, okay, you go into turn with a 3-drop blocker, then you play a 2-drop blocker, then you play Sabo and you draw 2, discard 2, and your whole board is immune to destruction effects, making it very hard for red to pick apart your board with things like Fire Fist, with Marco, and that puts you in a better position to defend yourself. So you're able to wall up quite well and then just counter punch your opponent into oblivion with Gear 4th Luffy. When you interact with other colors, I would say that in this particular case, Rebecca has a pretty nice matchup versus Whitebeard, because once Whitebeard gets down to 0 life, it is a simple matter of how many blockers they can put on board, because if you pocket 2 King Kong guns, you are likely going to be able to smash Whitebeard for all of its like hand. If they somehow get through 1, they're not getting rid of the other swing. So pretty favorable matchup versus Whitebeard. Of course, Whitebeard is still just in general the best non-gimmicky deck just in terms of raw card advantage and power. So there are going to be some matches that just don't go your way. But then when you go into Katakuri, you have a very, very weird kind of dynamic where Katakuri now has more top-end power than ever. More abilities to just like roll between the triggers from life, and it's just at a point where Katakuri is hitting life totals in games that I never even really saw in set 3. So now you have a weird point where Rebecca can take away 4 life in 1 turn. But what's taking away 4 life from 1 turn when you got up to 8 life because Rebecca doesn't do enough pressure in the early game? While it's trying to set up, you're just kind of getting free cruise rides up to sufficient life totals, and then all it takes is a couple of big moms and bam, you're sitting pretty high. A Katakuri on a trigger to put it back, like a Shirahoshi or something like that. Yeah, you're sitting pretty high. So Rebecca is just one of those things. And then against Law, I do have to mention Law right off the bat, because Law will have the ability to high roll like it normally does. But Law also plays a lot of one drops, and if there's anything that Rebecca can do without combo play, it's destroy one drops. So Rebecca actually has a fair amount of interactivity with Law that makes it not just an auto win for Law just to start out. So I think Rebecca is very, very good. I think Rebecca has favorable matchups across the board. Its matchup versus Yellow is concerning. But that being said, Rebecca clearly, I think, has the most favorable matchups. It doesn't have any auto losses, in my opinion, because it can still beat Yellow, or it can make it to a point where Yellow, like I've had games where Yellow is decked out versus Rebecca, because Rebecca can just keep putting up these walls, keep recycling the blockers, and keep playing them. So that's pretty cool. Now, the third one in the trio, I would say, is we're looking at Katakuri. Now, what Katakuri is now capable of, because of the additions of Capone, Beige, Sanji, we are now looking at a Katakuri deck where out of 50 cards, 25 or 24 of them or so are counters. Like, you got to think, you have the four Charlotte Parasparrows, you have the 4 Charlotte Crackers, you have the 4 blocker Sanji from the set, you have the 4 Capone Beiges, you have the 4 Shirahoshis. Like, you are starting to get to a point where half of your deck is triggers. That's insane. Like, that's insane. You are at a point where if you swing at your opponent's life, there is a 50-50 chance something comes out of there for the free. You discard a card from hand, and then you play a body on board, which is pseudo rush. It will be able to attack next turn, and that is crazy. Considering that, with the fact that these Sanji blockers are a little harder to remove, Rebecca can sometimes have a harder time swinging through it. Whitebeard's biggest asset is that its big bodies push through assured damage, but when you're adding blockers to the field and adding life back and adding bodies to the board that can actually contest with Whitebeard's big bodies, it is not as easy as it once was for Whitebeard to beat Katakuri. Katakuri now has the ability to high roll harder than ever because it still has its top end in the form of Big Mom, but it now has even more triggers, so that just playing against it is just pushing its game agenda. Not to mention that when you do get on a high roll and you start stacking this life, you're getting to these weird points where your opponent just activated 2 triggers from swinging on 3 life, and now you've gained 3 life, and they know they have to give you more cards on board just to try to. It's rough, especially with things like Capone Beige being able to just come out and essentially be your deck's Red Hawk. Comes out, be like, no, I'm not taking any more damage from that thing. That thing's not swinging. It's very, very strong. Now, when it comes to Katakuri still has some of its weaker points against a deck like Law. Law is going to be able to still stack up its board, and very few things in Katakuri's deck can do anything about that. You've got Strucin, and Strucin is going to be a card that can pop 1-drops like Bonnie, like Nami, like Chopper, like Beige. You have cards like the new Charlotte 2K that's going to be able to trash a trigger card from your hand to, on play, to tap something with 2 cost or less. That's going to get rid of any of those 1-drops or allow you to swing on any of those 1-drops, but it's also going to allow you to swing on Curly Dodons. So Yellow now has double the cards to interact with Law's board, but even so, that's 8 cards out of 50, and there are going to be a lot of matches where Law is still able to just go completely in, make its board without any resistance, and then just pop off. So that's a whole thing. But in terms of good matchups, I think they have a solid matchup versus Rebecca. They still have solid matchups versus Red. I think Katakuri is at a point where Yellow can hold its own. Yellow all across the board has some pretty even matchups, Law being its only unfavorable matchup. And then Blue is in a weird space because I think Blue is doing more and more. The introduction of Red Rock is going to be the part that I'm going to hone in the most. So moving past that, outside of our big 3, we now have the decks that can still do mad damage, but you have to be a little careful about whether you can see them. At the top of this list, I think it's Doflamingo. I think that Doflamingo's film deck is very, very, very powerful. You don't have to at me on that one. I know Doflamingo's film deck is very powerful, but these other things are for the most part archetypes. Synergy on almost every single card. In Rebecca, mad synergy. In Whitebeard, sheer gas, volume, and power. In Katakuri, more gas and power, but still synergy between these cards. Then you have Doflamingo. Doflamingo isn't the birth of an isn't the product of an archetype. It's the product of you fitting in two different previous archetypes that actually don't have anything to do with Doflamingo. You were using the green film cards from set 2, the film red cards, and you're using the purple film cards from all these movies, Gold, Strong World, Film Red, and you're shoving them all together because none of them are leader locked, none of them are color locked. So what you're looking at are film cards, search film cards that play film cards, and that is going to put you in a position where you are able to have a lot of synergy. A 1-drop film card could search in purple, could search a 7-drop Luffy green film leader, and then of course you have a couple of Doflamingo cards like the 10-drop Doflamingo himself. You have the Sugar, a couple copies of Diamante, but the main like value in playing Doflamingo is that these cards are actually very, very good together. Being able to play a 7-drop green Luffy blocker into a 4-drop Uta is just a massive wall of defense. Or playing it into a Brook for an attacker, and then that Brook playing the Nami, and then you getting a search off of the Nami is going to allow you to fill up your board with a blocker, 2 attackers, and get a search. There's a lot of different good configurations. However, the deck can also draw completely bricky, where you draw all the green cards, which never really worked amazing together. Like, yes, they could do things together, but I mean, Film Kid had up and down success. Or you draw all the film purple cards, which never did anything on their own, and that's actually a problem. So when it comes to this, you need to draw pretty well with Doflamingo, but the saving grace is the untapping too. As long as you have an extra card, you pretty much know you're not dying that turn. So stocking your deck with Punk Gibsons and Spiderwebs is going to really allow you to do some cool things. Punk Gibson's better for empty fields on your board, while Spiderwebs are better when you have an established blocker. Being able to block a 6K with a Luffy, or a 7K with a Luffy and drop a 1K, and then your opponent swings and you block with an Uta, -1 Dawn, tap something else, and then hit it with the Spider's Web to not only boost it up to 8K so it can't be killed, but then untap your Luffy blocker and then just look at your opponent. You stopped 1, 2, 3, potentially 4 attacks with that play, and you only had 2 things on board and the Spiderwebs in hand. So it's got a lot of gas, but not being a consolidated archetype that was designed by Bandai to be an archetype does sometimes show in how it can break. Now, past that, I want to touch on Zoro. Zoro is still very, very good. You can build it full aggro. You can build it extra card heavy. I personally feel like extra card Zoro is where it's at right now. I know a lot of people have been seeing success with aggro, but I think yellow is just in its bag right now, and there are going to be some matches where no matter how much aggro you have, yellow will outstrip you and those bodies will beat you down. Furthermore, when you find Law, which is still an excellent deck, if you don't have the extra card suite to interact with its board along with your Marcos, Law will just walk all over you. You'll get some good damage in, and then it'll just wall up and have all its functions intact, and then you'll just get rolled over. I also think in cases of like Dofi, if Dofi medium to high rolls you, they can set up a wall of swingers and blockers that can be insurmountable by a bunch of weenies. So I do think that the extra card Zoro is the way to go, but don't at me on that. That's just kind of my personal preference. And we're already at 17 minutes, so we're going to just make sure we kind of tail in. The next one I wanted to point out in this meta is blue in general. You do have Mono Crocodile running around doing its things, and Mono Crocodile and blue in general is actually very much so helped out by Red Rock. Red Rock just being able to tap 6 and put something in the bottom of the deck, like So Help Me, that's one of the best things that could have ever happened to blue. Because blue always had the issue where when the body was too big, you couldn't touch it. And now that's not the case. And that's actually one of the things that has always held blue back. In set 1, sticking a kid could just ruin a blue's day. They had no way to interact with it. Red Rock wouldn't have let that happen. Set 2, Whitebeard. What is bouncing Whitebeard? It's a 9-drop. Mihawk can't do it. So they needed something like Red Rock. Set 3, Big Mom stacking on the board. They needed something to bust that up. Now, when your opponent taps 10 to play a Big Mom, yeah, you'll lose a life and they gain a life. But when you can return fire with a tap 6 and put it at the bottom of the deck and still have Dawn to play out the rest of your turn, infinitely great. This is the point where you were able to start finally controlling your opponent's board, and now blue's going to be able to shine, because some of the only ways that they were getting beat down was when your opponent had a beat stick they could just put so much weight behind, and blue had to burn multiple extras or a full blocker and knowing they're not getting it back. Yeah, that's not the same. Also, Mihawk on board was a massive boon towards blue, because Mihawk was their beat stick. They could defend with a single 2K, with a single extra card, and negate most of your turn for trying to go in on said Mihawk. However, now they have Kaido as well, which is a huge beat stick that also starts bouncing stuff. They have Mihawk and Kaido, which is their like top end package, but they also have Red Rock to get rid of opposing threats that could contest Mihawk and Kaido just with their raw base alone. So we're looking at a meta that's actually pretty cool, because when you look at all that, even when you have the big three, Zoro can come in and fight Whitebeard. Zoro can come in and fight Katakuri if it's fast enough. Getting rid of the bodies that Katakuri's playing out from triggers will eliminate some of the best parts about Yellow, while being able to do enough damage to combat the life gain that they're going to be gaining at the end of the match. They can also go through fast enough to blow up blockers on Black's side and Rebecca before they can get fully set up behind the wall. And they also have blockers in the form of Marco and other blockers you can play if you'd like. They can help them get over Gear 4th Luffy. Also, Gear 4th Luffy can be minus and destroyed. Red has a fair amount of ways to actually get these off of the board in Zoro. Then when you go to Law, Law faces Rebecca, hit or miss, you know. Rebecca has to get through, has to set up and then swing through, but Rebecca also has a bunch of cards that can destroy one cost, Kyrios, the Tontata, and so yeah, there are going to be some times where Law just gets his stuff destroyed and can't get it off the ground, but at the same time there's going to be some matches that it allows to high roll. Law can face Yellow and also very much so just play the way they want to play. Blue, not so much. There's a lot of cards in blue that allow you to interact with the Lobies and bounce them or put them on the bottom of the deck, so that's pretty strong. And then you look at blue. Blue can have pretty good matchups across the board. I think against Yellow it's a little rough because blue's killing power until they start playing those Mihawks and those Kaidos is a little low, but it's kind of a struggle to see who solidifies their late game harder. And then you've also got the like just things like this format. This format is just I like at the end there I just kind of was like I just was trying to think. There's a lot of things you can do with this format. There are decks that are kind of better than the others. I mean, like I said, Doflamingo is still able to do its job. It can high roll. Almost all of these decks can high roll, but they all, when they get maybe about 5 out of 10 or lower hand, that's when you need to start looking at these matchups to see how it works, because that is when you're sitting there like, oh, okay, well. So with that being said, yeah, well, like I said, we'll take this to a close, and stay tuned on the channel if you like or want to look at what Battle Spirit Saga is doing. Set 3 is releasing a brand new color, and that color is really crazy. I'm about to go into the spoilers for blue as a whole today as well. But yeah, I hope to see you on another video sometime. Just pop over on Universe X, and like I said, if you like the video, like the video. Let's see if we can get this one to 100 likes. Subscribe if you haven't subscribed yet, and yeah, like I said, look out for some New York Comic Con coverage. I also stream. It's all in the link tree, but I will see you in the next video.